The aftermath of last night's Microsoft-based outage, I know that there were ground stops, I believe, throughout the night. I think there's three main airlines that were mostly affected, but how are things looking this morning? Operations mostly back to normal?
That's right. This has had a number of impacts across many different transportation systems. The one that most people will experience is the effect on airlines. The airlines are working through it. Different airlines were able to address the issue, some quicker than others, but just because of the way the network works and how tightly scheduled flights are, even when an issue is addressed early in the morning hours, it can cascade through the day and into the evening. So if you're planning to fly today, definitely want to make sure to get information from your airline, check your flight status. Also, check our website because we have a number of protections we've created for how airlines need to take care of passengers if they get stranded. And we want to make sure that you know what to expect there. We've seen some effects on freight rail. Really depends from one railroad to another, some spot issues across certain transit systems. Everybody is in the process of getting back to normal today, but I think some organizations and systems will be able to do that more quickly than others.
Can you talk about the broader issue of air traffic reliability, air traffic control system reliability? Now, this was not, I'm going to point out, this was not an FAA issue. This was a Microsoft issue. This did not just affect the airlines or even transportation systems. This affected almost every computer in one way or another across much of the globe. However, when we have fresh in our memories outages, Southwest Airlines has had a couple of high-profile outages. There's been some air traffic controlling issues over the last couple of years. When you piece it all together, you can't help but think how vulnerable these systems are, whether it's a bug in the system, whether it's a malicious cyber attack, some kind of other human error. Your reassurance for air travelers and anybody who uses any kind of computer controlled transit system, this is, I'm sure, even subway systems might be affected by this. Going forward, that these systems are vulnerable. There's a very thin line, I guess, holding it all together. And when something crashes like that, it makes you realize it.
Yeah, over the years, our systems have become more digitized. Overall, that's made them more efficient and stronger, but it creates new forms of vulnerability. Every time a new technology comes online, you have to assess the issues that come along with it. Again, look, the big picture is that every form of transportation has become especially when we're talking about something like air transportation, has become better off through a number of these technologies. But every technology's got its downside. And an especially important thing to keep track of here is that there's so many different players. Most transportation infrastructure, it's actually in local hands or in private hands. The air traffic control system is in some ways the exception that proves the rule. We own and operate that on behalf of the American people as a government agency, but highways are not run by the federal government. They're regulated by the federal government and funded by the federal government. Same thing with railroads. We oversee them, but they're in private hands. And so we need to engage private actors, local actors, and state actors to make sure that whatever they control is secure and robust. And I think there are going to be a lot of conversations in the days to come about resiliency and redundancy, as people rightly ask, how can one glitch in one software system create this many cascading impacts around the world?
Mr. Secretary, continue on that theme, if you will. Roll that into the broader effort to update air traffic control systems across the country. This is something that is still, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong and update the situation, but still being kicked around by Congress. It ultimately will take acts of Congress, but from air traffic control computer systems to the towers themselves, we're still in need of a major updates, refurbishments. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do have a lot of legacy structure, whether we're talking about air traffic controlled towers, just the physical space they're in, down to things like the air conditioning and the elevators, all the way through to some of the software we're using. Now, we are in the middle of major upgrades to our systems, including our airport infrastructure. A big part of the Biden infrastructure package is billions of dollars going to everything from small rural airports to major systems at global hubs. But we're going to have to do more. We have asked Congress for more capabilities and more resources to get that done. Let's remember that we're building on an extraordinary record. The safety record of U.S. aviation is almost unbelievable when you consider that just since this administration arrived alone, we've had billions of people get on airplanes and zero fatalities in crashes. We take that seriously, and keeping that up means making sure you have your systems for safety staying with the time. Likewise, on performance, we had some real frustrations with the airlines, especially a couple of years ago. Last year, though, we saw one of the lowest cancellation rates we've seen in about a decade. So far this year, we were holding to that, although today's obviously a day with lots of disruptions. So we've seen good progress, but it's just not going to be possible to cope with the growth in air travel demand, or frankly, even to maintain the current standard that people expect, unless we invest in the future. That means systems, infrastructure, and critically, it means people, the staffing side of things.
You're really doing a good job of laying down the theme of my next question, building for the future and trying to keep transit systems running while modernizing them at the same time. I want to bring up something that former President Trump hit on in his speech last night. And it's not the politics of it, it's the policy, and electric vehicles in particular. It's no surprise to you. I know you get it on Capitol Hill, and this was a theme throughout the Republican National Convention. Really, there's a more, I'm sure, graceful way of putting this, but crapping all over the electric vehicle ambitions and goals from the Biden administration, and even here in Governor Newsom in California. And this promise to do away with what Trump called an electric vehicle mandate, which actually doesn't really exist federally. Let's put that aside for a second. Here in California, we are trying to go electric vehicle, or at least gas vehicle-free sales by 2030. And the idea to phase out most gasoline-powered cars on the roads here by 2035. The state's rushing to build electric vehicle chargers, fast chargers in particular, because there just is not the infrastructure there to support the goals right now. Can you talk about both the skepticism on the right from this transition, which, given the heat waves we're experiencing this summer alone and the encroaching effects of climate change, seem to be urgent, and the massive challenges of preparing both kind of psychologically the population to make this transition, and then the infrastructure and the physical work that needs to get done so that everybody can drive an electric vehicle comfortably?
Well, I come at this from the perspective of somebody who grew up in the industrial Midwest. I grew up in northern Indiana in a city which was really a company town for Studebaker, which went out of business before I was even born. And I didn't even know until I left town for college that it was unusual to have acres of collapsing factory buildings around you when you were going to school or going around your town. I saw for myself what happens when an industry fails to keep up with the times. And a big part of what we're focused on here is not just, of course, to do the right thing in terms of cleaner air and climate, but also to make sure that the electric vehicle revolution that is very much underway is a made in America electric vehicle revolution. The Trump administration allowed China to build a major advantage in EVs, and the Chinese government is investing hugely in subsidizing their EV industry. I promise you, it is not because the Chinese Communist Party is populated by big environmentalists. It's because they understand the strategic power of gaining that kind of control over the market. Our policy is to make sure that America leads the way in this massive transition that will either take place with American leadership or will leave America behind. There's two big things we really need to make sure we do while the industry is working on preparing the supply side. We need to make sure they're affordable. That's why we have the tax credits that have brought the cost of buying an EV to pretty much the same as an equivalent gas car, depending on the model. And the second thing is charging. Even though about 80% of EV charging happens at home, there are lots of people who live in apartment buildings or don't have a garage they can just plug in the wall. And of course, if you're driving longer distances routinely, you need to know that there are chargers when you need them. Now, it took decades to get the network of gas stations that we're all used to for gas cars, but we need to move much quicker than that when it comes to getting the chargers out there, which is why we're bringing federal funding to help get that done. California is certainly a state that's working aggressively toward that. But I would say every state, red, blue, or purple, has submitted their plans to us on how they're going to use their federal dollars. And they're increasingly getting underway. In the second half of this decade, you're going to see lots of chargers installed to meet and we think exceed the president's goal of 500,000 chargers by the end of the decade.
Speak candidly, though. I mean, on California's goals, there are, let's see, There's rough estimates on how many electric vehicle chargers are actually up and running in the state. But by 2030, they need at least 1 million is the estimated, but by the state's own auditors, 1 million fast charging systems to support the amount of electric vehicles they want sold and running on the roads. By 2035, at least 2 million, over 2 million electric chargers have to be in place. And so that's about 130,000 new stations that need to be built a year. We're not coming close to that yet. I mean, with the good intentions of California's EV goals, to be sure laid out, is it too ambitious? And is it too much to ask people to just be patient? We promise the infrastructure to support this green new transit revolution that we're promising will be there eventually, especially when it seems to be such impatient, populace these days.
Well, I think the impatience comes from the fact that we really are in a race here. Look, I do believe that the EV transition will happen no matter what, but just letting it play out and take forever is really not an option when you think about making sure that America retains the lead, and when you talk about making sure that we that we beat our climate goals. So the state goals that you have here in California are more aggressive than federal goals, but we often view our federal goals as really a floor and welcome states working to innovate or invest above and beyond the goal that we've set for the country as a whole.
Your theme here today in Los Angeles is connecting neighborhoods that were historically cut in half by highways, by roads, often through lower income neighborhoods, often neighborhoods populated by brown and black families. This, again, really even plays into the electric vehicle debate. You're trying to kind of right the wrongs of the past on the fly while keeping your current transit systems running, while keeping drivers happy while working on diversions, things that might ultimately back up traffic, at least in the short term. Look, it's even playing out, you're probably aware of a plan to reconnect MacArthur Park here near downtown Los Angeles. Wilshire Boulevard runs right through the middle of the park. The park is beautiful, but has been plagued by crime, drug use, and homelessness. The thought is they want to shut down Wilshire Boulevard, connect the park, and create a true pedestrian throughway right there. A lot of complaints, though, because Wilshire is a major artery in and out of downtown Los Angeles. So, Mr. Secretary, how do you bridge all of these competing concerns under such a rushed timeline?
So I think we need to start with the principle that it ought to be possible for people, small businesses for that matter, pedestrians, bicyclists, and cars to coexist peacefully across our cities and our streetscapes. Before, especially what we inherited from the 50s and 60s, there was this strategy that was the car at all costs, and it made entire neighborhoods give way to the idea that the only thing that mattered in transportation was propelling individual cars through as quickly as possible. And ironically, that led to a situation that not only meant lots of highway and freeway building, but actually more congestion, because there was a disinvestment in alternatives like transit that would have given people opportunities to not be sitting in traffic all the time. What we're trying to do is make sure we address the entire system, from making sure there are better transit options to making sure that highways and freeways operate efficiently and safely, and reimagining some of these spaces where there was really destruction of the fabric of a neighborhood or an urban area in order to jam a highway through it. In some parts of the country, we have funded projects to keep the highway but move it underground or deck or cap over it. We're doing that in Dallas with I-35. We're doing that in Buffalo with the Kensington Expressway. Yeah. Other places, it's more the piece of infrastructure is intact, but you got to connect over or under it. That's what we're doing with the 710. This is constructing new pedestrian and bicycle overcrossing so that the neighborhood is more stitched together. But the thing I want to emphasize, whether it's the proposal you're discussing or any other, is none of the 60,000 things, we're literally 60,000 projects across the country that we're funding so far through the Biden infrastructure package. None of them are ones that we are designing or dictating out of Washington, D.C. We get that this needs to be a community process. Communities need to decide what is right for them. The answers aren't all coming from Washington, but more the funding is. We're here to help when a community aligns around a vision that's going to help restore that city, that neighborhood, that park, whatever it is. And we're here to help with the dollars.
Save the most delicate issue for the end, and that is President Biden. Without getting into the politics of all this, can you talk to our listeners who saw a president and vice president throughout 8 years serving next to President Obama, and then a president for his first term who seemed sharp, who seemed policy-driven, who had a command of policy issues, certainly seemed exceeding some of his political opponents, and who have seen over the last 6 months through the debate, through various interviews, through various public appearances, a president who seems to have slowed, who seems to have problems finishing thoughts, connecting sentences. The perception is out there, whether I guess Democrats or the White House likes it or not. Reassure those people that the president still has it. And what do you say to people who say, I've seen diminished capabilities from him in public venues?
Yeah, I'm not out to claim that he's not 10 years older than he was 10 years ago. But I do want people to know that anytime he has been needed to weigh in or guide certainly any issue I've worked on, from a broad policy issue around infrastructure to some very acute tactical minute-to-minute issues, like when we were dealing with the bridge collapse in Baltimore, which is the thing I've worked most closely with him on this calendar year. He has demonstrated the leadership that the department and that I have been counting on as a cabinet member. The bottom line is, it's one thing for somebody to mix up a name and say one name when they obviously mean another name in the middle of giving an answer. It's another to recognize that he's really good at being president, and that's what America needs from its president. The things that he has been able to deliver are things that no president in my lifetime has come through on. Whether we're talking about job growth, whether we're talking about victories standing up to big pharma or ensuring that people were protected from junk fees, or, of course, the piece that I get to work on every day, an infrastructure package that the last president promised and failed to deliver, and that, frankly, for 30 or 40 years, Washington has been trying to do and just couldn't get it done.
And
Joe Biden got it done.
You're confident he can keep that up for 4 more years?
Yeah, look, every time I need something from him, he is there. He delivers the leadership that we need, and I'm proud to be part of this team.
9:20, almost on the dot, Mr. Secretary. I will stop.